Hello, welcome all to the course Food Processing and Waste Management. My name is Syed Abdul, working as Assistant Professor at Arcot Butler Technical University, Kanpur under Techibri project. So in the previous sections of this course, we have seen what is food processing waste and what is food waste, what are the various methodologies to manage the waste generated from the food processing industries. In this lecture, we will see ISO 14001. This is a standard ISO International Standards Organization. So ISO 14000 series, ISO 14001 is the first of the standards released in ISO 14000 series, which are related to environment protection. Okay, so we will discussing this importance of ISO 14001 series in food industries. The outlines of this lecture, we will try to understand the environment in food processing industry and its impact, on the environment, ISO 14001, and then environmental management system and various components of the various environment management system, benefits of EMS and barriers to implementation of EMS. So if you look at the food processing industry, there is a large amount of food is being produced, processed, transported by the food industry and consumed by the consumers, and these activities either have direct or indirect impact on consumer health as well as the environment. So if you look at these two images, when you talk about the micro environment, which involves only the organization and the suppliers of the organization, customers of the organization, competitors of the organization, and the intermediates involved in the organization reaching the market. Okay, so all this comes under the environment, micro environment of this organization. When you look at the macro environment, there are technological issues, global issues, socio-cultural issues, and then population and demographic factors, economic, legal, political. So all this comes under the micro environment of the food processing industry. So if you look at the issues, environmental issues in the food processing industry are caused by food processing industry. So you can see food processing loss. When you process a food product, there is huge amount of losses generated. For example, if you take the processing of fruits and vegetables, there is loss of this peel of the food material, core of the food material, and food wastage, which is we have discussed in the previous sections. Packaging, the numerous amount of packaging material gets disposed after the consumption of the food material. Energy efficiency, the efficiency of the equipments more often is not up to the mark, so that there is huge amount of energy loss during the processing of food products. For example, if you take the bakery oven, which required huge amount of energy to process a single batch of cake, at the same time there is huge amount of loss to the loss of heat energy to the environment. Transportation of foods involves energy requirements, as well as during transportation, if there is any damage to the food material, and during transportation also there is loss of gases during transportation of the vehicles. Water consumption, so huge amount of water is being consumed by the industry to process the food material, as well as to clean the equipment, clean the surroundings. Waste management is also one of the environmental issues of the food processing industry. So if you look at this international standards organization, especially when we talk about this 14001 series, so ISO is an voluntary standards, and it is an international standards organization. They are having a very numerous number of series like ISO 9000, ISO 22000, ISO 9000, ISO 20000, and ISO 14001 series are mostly implemented in food processing industries. So if you look at this ISO 14001, the post-green revolution has motivated consumers toward more environmentally friendly products. So a product can be called environmentally friendly when its life cycle from cradle to grave respects the needs of the environment. Then only we can call it as an environmentally friendly product. So ISO 14000 is an internationally agreed standards that sets out the requirements for an environmental management system. So that time there was a need felt to manage the to implement a system known as environmental management system to control the environmental impacts of the food processing industries or any other industries. So in this regard, ISO has developed this 14001 series. It helps organizations to improve the environmental performance through more efficient use of resources and reduction of waste, gaining a competitive advantage and trust of the stakeholders. So if you look at environmental management system, helps organizations identify, manage, monitor and control their environmental issues in a holistic manner. An environmental management system helps organizations identify, manage, monitor and control their environmental issues in a holistic manner. So in this regard, it is ISO 14001 series. So there are various phases of environmental management system to implement an environmental management system. First one, environment policy, planning. After policy, then you have to plan, then implement it and make it to operational, then check and corrective actions, check for corrective actions, then review of the management. Now we will discuss one by one. Look at the environmental policy. That means a commitment is given by the top management to regulatory compliance, pollution prevention and continual improvement in the environmental performance of a particular food industry. So here, having an environmental policy, every industry should have this environmental policy to implement this EMS, that is environment management system, and this environmental policy commits the top management to regulatory compliance, because there are regulatory requirements to be followed by Environmental Protection Agency and Environmental Protection Act. According to this act, there are some environmental requirements to be followed. So the top management commitments towards the regulatory compliance, pollution prevention and continual improvement in environmental performance can be achieved by environmental policy. The second phase is planning. So it requires the identification of all environmental aspects like activities, products and services that can interact with the environment and their associated impacts. That means how they are going to change the environment. Third phase of the environmental management system is implementation and operation. It is the element that will let the organization to achieve the environmental policy commitments. Whatever the commitments we have taken in the environment policy, those commitments can be achieved with proper implementation and operations. A suitable structure is to be designed and specific responsibilities assigned to employees across different departments so that the commitments given in the environmental policy of the organizations are met, or you can say regulatory requirements given by the regulatory bodies such as environmental protection agencies can be met. The fourth phase of the environmental management system is checking and correcting. Requires to have procedures in place for monitoring and measuring environmental parameters, performance and progress related to the objectives and targets. So whatever the targets and objectives that was set in environment policy need to be whether these objectives are achieved or these targets are achieved or not can be assessed by checking and correcting phase. The last phase in the environment management system is review. That is, management need to review as per ISO 14001 on a periodic basis to assess whether any changes are needed in the policy which reflects the top management commitment. Okay, here management review if required any corrections or any operations need to be done or any restructural reforms to be taken in the environment management system can be done after the review of the management, and this also shows the commitment of the management towards the environmental protection. These are the overview of the phases of the environmental management system. First one policy should be there, then planning, implementation and operation, checking corrective action and then review of the top management. Benefits of implementing environment management system in the food industry are continual improvement through pollution prevention initiatives. So there will be pollution prevention initiatives, reduced environmental risk, better cost containment, assuring regulatory compliance. This is very important. Most of the industries implement ISO 40001 as part of their regulatory compliance and enhancing staff morale because they are producing such products which are having less impact on the environment. So barriers to implementing EMS is I said as many of the food processing industries consider this ISO 14001 implementation as a regulatory compliance rather than their responsibility. So that is lack of top management commitment and visibility. Frequent changes of personnel and top management. So there are change in resources of the industry with respect to times that may cause deviations or barriers in implementing the environment management system. So lack of resources is also barrier. Lack of manpower resources, lack of money resources also is a barrier for implementing the environment management system. So as I said, it is not recognized as the responsibility of the whole organization. Very few organizations considered EMS as the responsibility. Most of the organizations consider it as a regulatory compliance, and they just make arrangements to meet the regulatory requirements instead of feeling it as a responsibility. So these are the various phases and benefits as well as barriers of implementing environment management system. Thank you.